was nothing I could do, nothing I could do.
Hello and welcome to This Is Something I Can Do, Overcoming PTSD and Trauma with Aromatherapy. I'm your host, Amanda May-Fitzgerald. In these unprecedented times, we all desire to make a difference with the division, violence, climate change, and sustainable energy issues. We all know the time for planning has passed. It's time for action, but it is difficult for our voices to be heard. I'm a trauma survivor with PTSD, and my flight, fight, or freeze response is triggered in almost every waking moment in these times. I am learning to overcome my triggers by facing my traumas and putting them in their rightful place. I know many others who are doing the same. We can make a difference in our lives and the world. I am a professional aromatherapist, and through my work, I have found purpose and the tools I need to help myself and others. This podcast will shed light on the effects of trauma and what my guests and I are doing to overcome ours while helping others in the process. Please join us on this journey as we find others using their voice to help trauma survivors too. I'm your host, Amanda May-Fitzgerald, and this is Something I Can Do.
I still sit here with it all.
Hello and welcome to the introductory episode of Something I Can Do. This week, October 4th to the 10th, 2021, has been designated Mental Illness Awareness Week, and I couldn't think of a better time to launch this podcast. Please, if you are experiencing any mental health symptoms, such as feeling isolated, depressed, lack of energy, reach out to a psychologist and talk about what you're feeling. It helps more than you know. I'm your host, Amanda May-Fitzgerald. Something I Can Do evolved from a suggestion from a colleague. I was at the AIA conference in 2019 in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and I met the founder of Severa, Vanessa Boucher there, and her and I were discussing, the common misconceptions of essential oil use and some of the things that need to be highlighted in our industry. And she said, you should really start a podcast because this is information that really needs to get out there. And it planted a little seed in my head, and I went home and started thinking about it. And I was talking to a friend one day and told her that I was thinking of starting this podcast. And she said, you need to go down to this place. It just opened up right down the street called the Film Hub. And it is a co-working space for media, for marketing. And they have a podcast room. So I came down here and I checked it out, and I was so inspired by this room. I just wanted to sit right down and put these headphones on and get going. And so I joined right away as a member, and I had no idea how I was going to get a podcast done. I knew that it wasn't going to happen at home, not with the lawnmowers going next door and all of the activity that happens in our home with, 4 children and a dog. So I knew I really wanted to get this podcast going, but I had no idea where to start. And I was lucky enough to, at the first members meeting here at Film Hub, meet a man named Martin Danner, who was developing a workshop for children or teenagers, young adults, to create their own podcasts. And he wanted a guinea pig, somebody to, work out all the kinks with. And so he offered to teach me how to start a podcast. And I'm just really grateful to him for what he's done, for the time that he devoted. I know it probably seems like it was all for naught because here it is a year later. But is it a year or is it 2? Oh my gosh. COVID has really taken our sense of time and flipped it on its head, hasn't it? So I just really wanted to thank Martin Danner for the work that he did getting this podcast up off the ground with me in the beginning, and I just want him to know that I haven't forgotten. Yay, it worked. And I'm very grateful to him for that, because I had no idea where to go or how to start. And then the thing is that I started really excited, wanting to share, my passion for essential oils, but I kept hitting this anxiety block, and it just kept getting worse and worse. And the more I hit this block, it was coming up in my therapy as well, my sessions with my therapist, that I was realizing that I was having a really hard time with exposure, the idea of being exposed, and that was directly linked to my PTSD. And it was really disheartening for me. I had at one point wanted to be an actress, and I had pursued acting somewhat, not a lot. I did some community theater when I was, in my 20s. But that, for a time, and all through my childhood, that was my identity. That was who I was. That was what I wanted to do with my life. And getting up on stage and performing, being in front of people, speaking, was part of my persona. So the fact that I was having this taken from me, and that I was struggling so hard just even to get my voice out there, it really lit a fire under me, and it has been quite a while since I started this journey. But I am determined that I will get this podcast out there, because I believe that others going through the same kind of struggles might maybe get some kind of support from hearing that somebody else is going through it too. So ultimately, I came to the conclusion that this was something I could do. So over the next several weeks, I'm going to dive deep into a topic near and dear to me: complex post-traumatic stress disorder, or CPTSD. Most are familiar with post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, and while the diagnostic criteria for CPTSD is not yet defined by the American Psychological Association, or the APA, CPTSD was formally introduced by the World Health Organization in its 11th edition of the International Classification of Disease in 2018. The WHO describes CPTSD as having all the core symptoms of PTSD, with an addition of difficulties with affect regulation, self-concept, and interpersonal relationships. Now, your friendly neighborhood psychologist could help explain in great detail what all of that means, and help unpack that for you. And let me be clear, I am not a psychologist. I do live with CPTSD, and I am an aromatherapist. And I use my aromatherapy daily to help me with my CPTSD and help me stay grounded and in the moment and keep me relaxed and even. And I hope, it is my hope, that sharing my experiences and struggles will help others who might relate as well in their own journeys back to themselves. So I want to touch on the core symptoms of PTSD as they are defined by the American Psychological Association. But I would like to read from the APA's website their definition of trauma. Trauma is an emotional response to a terrible event like an accident, rape, or natural disaster. Immediately after the event, shock and denial are typical. Longer-term reactions include unpredictable emotions, flashbacks, strained relationships, and even physical symptoms like headaches or nausea. While these feelings are normal, some people have difficulty moving on with their lives. Psychologists can help these individuals find constructive ways of managing their emotions. So I strongly encourage anybody out there who may be feeling that this information is familiar to them, if it's stirring up emotions for you, you may want to reach out and find a therapist if you don't already have one. Psychology Today has a search bar on their website where you can find a therapist near you. You can also call 411 and they will help you find and get connected with a mental health professional in your area if you're feeling triggered by anything that is related here. Core symptoms of PTSD, as abbreviated by the APA, are intrusive or recurrent memories of the trauma, avoidance of trauma reminders, feeling sad, angry, or numb, feeling on edge, or other changes in reactivity or arousal. I just want to talk about those, how those core symptoms manifest in me. Intrusive or recurrent memories of the trauma, the flashbacks would be underneath this. And for me, I have experienced the flashbacks that are so real that it feels like you are in the moment. And that ranges from actually visually feeling as if you are back in the trauma, emotionally feeling as if the trauma is occurring, and physically feeling as if the trauma is occurring. And usually they're disjointed. I usually have, when I have a flashback, it is either of one of those key feelings. It's either physical or emotional or visual or auditory. I don't typically have them all together, and I'm not sure if that's because of the manner in which I was, my trauma occurred, or if that is part of my PTSD, but that is how I experience it. Avoidance of trauma reminders. Well, for me, I avoided the idea that I had PTSD for 18 years, even though I had three different doctors tell me that the things that I was describing to them sounded like PTSD. It took me 3 years, once I found a psychologist to help me with my pain, to recognize and accept that I had PTSD. So that is how avoidance of trauma manifested in me. I was blocked. It wasn't just that I just didn't want to face it or look at it. It was mentally blocked from being recognized. Feeling sad, angry, or numb. It's regular to feel those emotions when thinking about trauma, but numb can get to the point where you're just disassociated from your body and you can't really feel emotions. Feeling on edge or other changes in reactivity, for me, it's very much hyper-arousal. I'm hyper-aroused, especially when I'm out and about, and that looks like just always wanting to know where the exit is wherever I am, always wanting to know what any of the safety protocols are wherever I am, always being aware of who is in my immediate bubble, so to speak, my line of vision perhaps, always surveying rooms and just being familiar with who is around me. And that's hyper-arousal. And I didn't realize most people don't do that for a very long time, but I do. It can be difficult to move on and overcome after a lived experience of trauma. It is even more difficult when our bodies and minds develop pathways resulting in the trauma being just one triggered moment away from reliving the full experience of it time and time again. Certain populations are recognized as vulnerable to experiencing multiple traumas, thereby making them vulnerable to developing a variation of PTSD known as Cptsd, as I've discussed. There are also many who are currently under-recognized and often unsupported, leading to cyclical behaviors having detrimental results on their daily lives. Recognizing Cptsd is the first step towards healing, and the development and integration of healthy behaviors is how you get through your struggles and get back to you. Join me over the next couple weeks as I dive deep into defining Cptsd and my own journey back to myself.
Here is something you can do, something you can do. This is something you can do, something you can do. Here is something I can do, something I can do. This is something I can do, something I can do.